Shabbat Shalom. I'm Shira Berkowitz. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm so honored to be with you this Shabbat. Thank you for being a pioneering congregation and consistently on the front lines of LGBTQ plus Jews and our visibility. I'm here this evening speaking on my experience as a transgender lobbyist, working against the state of attacks on transgender Missourians to keep our rights. My organization, Promo, is a statewide LGBTQ plus equality organization working to confront systemic inequalities every day in big and small ways across Missouri. And our public policy work is focused on resisting harmful and dangerous bills while also building momentum for LGBTQ plus affirming and inclusive policy. But a little about myself first. I grew up in a conservative Jewish household and congregational life. I attended Jewish summer camp from a very young age and then became an adult who worked at Jewish summer camps. And as a young adult, I find myself in many opportunities to create and build Jewish community in St. Louis. I wasn't always out. My whole life, I've known that I didn't fit into the lens and body of the one society was subscribing to me, but I didn't have the support and visibility in community, specifically in Jewish community, to release my truth. I actually have a background of struggling to align being both trans and queer in Jewish community, which is manifested in being an adult that works to build affirming Jewish communities, as well as an advocate to insist that Jewish communities can be better. Alongside this struggle, though, it was Jewish values that taught me to be an advocate that dreams and creates a better world. A few jobs into my professional career, I decided to take a role leading advocacy efforts with a local synagogue in St. Louis. I was enchanted by the idea that a synagogue could be a place that participates in movement work, that uses its strength in having a base of members that are dedicated to the place and therefore might be movable in advocacy. After all, what I know about how to build a better world, how to create inclusivity, and how to celebrate diversity and lean into its lessons to build equity, I learned in the Torah. I still believe that synagogues are a place to build movement, to join the movements. And yet my experience working for a synagogue, regardless of the values that it stood on and preached on, was not an inclusive work environment for being a trans leader. I struggled with having healthcare in an institution that had religious exemptions, that didn't have healthcare that allowed me to live my authentic self. And after struggling for a handful of years to be a visible trans leader, I moved over to an explicitly LGBTQ plus advocacy organization where I could put the struggle of living authentically me down and focus on showing up to the work as my full self. I cannot overstate the power that this has built in my life, nor can I overstate the importance of Jewish organizations and Jewish leaders in all organizations to insist that the Jewish values we live that build our institutions start internally in order to support business externally. I'm lucky that in the Midwest alone, small nonprofits do have capacity to provide equitable healthcare to trans employees. It was this access that has allowed me to be the trans leader I've become. And at Promo, the organization that I've now worked for a handful of years, believes that Missouri can be a state in which LGBTQ plus people, every demographic, race, ethnicity, zip code, and experience are valued and thriving. And while that's far from our lived experience now as Missourians, we know we will eventually get there by confronting systemic inequalities to liberate the full spectrum of our LGBTQ plus community from discrimination and oppression. In that realm, I'll switch back to work. I won't lie. The first few years I worked in LGBTQ plus public policy felt incredibly challenging, but they could not have prepared me for the environment and climate that we advocate in today. Not unlike many states in this country, Missouri lacks non-discrimination protections under law. We're one of the states that relied on the passage of the Federal Equality Act, which did not pass, to gain our community protections because there's not a clear path for how we achieve them in our own state. For those who don't know much about Missouri, we've gone from being a blue state to a purple state to a deeply red state, and in fact, one of the reddest in the nation. I know this isn't our fate, and we do have a chance to flip the state back. But in the past couple of years, our legislatures have been participating in and setting the tone that transgender youth and adults can be used as political pawns to gain power in their own political careers. That reality and rhetoric makes this a very challenging year. This year alone, Missouri has faced 34 public policy attacks on transgender Missourians and are very close to passing these bills that ban gender-affirming care and the ability for trans youth to participate in sports alongside their peers. We are not alone in these attacks, And all of us, everyone working in state LGBTQ plus policy, knows that this is dangerous and violent government overreach. In fact, Missourians haven't lost their rights yet. But as we watch other states topple their protections, topple access to gender affirming care, and criminalize parents who are just providing healthcare to their children, our residents are scared, full of fear and anxiety, and do not feel safe here now. Legislators are calling into question trans and queer folks' very right to exist and spewing transphobic and homophobic rhetoric. It's no surprise that trans and queer communities live in fear. We know as Jews, we know as LGBTQ plus Jews, that normalizing hate has violent and deadly consequences. These attacks affect everyone, not only trans people living in conservative states like mine, but everyone. Parents of cisgender kids, LGBTQ plus people living anywhere in this country, business leaders who work under non-discrimination protections, people who believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, people who are afraid that healthcare, a basic human right, is being taken away from family decisions. Family decisions that the government does not have a right to decide for families or for practitioners. Throughout my life in this public policy climate and reaching backwards into my experiences at Jewish summer camp, I knew that we had to do better to create a world in which our kids do not have to be subjected to a world where the background of growing up is hate. I'm honored to say that those on the most front lines of countering this work has been my friends, colleagues, and networks within the Jewish community. It's been the rabbis in my city, rabbis across the state, that have stepped up on the front lines of public advocacy. Jewish day schools in my state have stepped up to make sure that trans kids not only feel welcome, but have all of the tools and resources necessary for them specifically to thrive like every other child in their school. And for this, I couldn't be prouder to have the Jewish community going from being a place that I wasn't able to be visible in to a community that steps out in the front lines to make sure that visibility is the bare minimum. With my Jewish friends, going back to summer camp, we set out to create our own summer camp. Camp Indigo Point is a product that came out of the climate of these attacks, that comes off of the climate of LGBTQ bars and safe spaces from my generation and prior generations closing their doors. Camp Indigo Point has become a new haven, where gender expansive and all LGBTQ plus youth have a place to thrive among their peers. I believe that in a generation, these attacks on our bodies could disappear. The opportunities for trans Americans to thrive will be abundant, and being a visible trans leader will be the norm, not the exception. To get there, though, we have to put our resources into protecting our kids now. We have to work as a community to make sure that trans Jews feel welcome, safe, and have the tools and resources to thrive alongside everyone else. We have to continue being on the front lines of these fights, and we have to continue our reputation of being a community that shows up and speaks out. For those of you who have been our advocates for years, and for those of you who are joining us today, thank you. We need you. I look forward to growing our movement for trans rights alongside you. Shabbat Shalom.